Oh, okay. I know what that's spawning in now. That line there. Oh. A stream? Impossible.
Oh, I like this.
You like what? Oh, that is cool.
I like it a lot.
Nilha. Do well. Team Chaotix. La-dee-da-dee. You'd live to see another day.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. A lot of the footage we've been sending at Frontiers is like 60 FPS. So it'd be interesting to see if it runs that smoothly.
It's Sonic with FPS. Unheard of. It's Lag Hill Zone out there.
Lag Hill Zone. Oh, Lag Hill Zone.
Lag Hill.
I'm not lying when I say Sonic Frontiers can be the best 3D Sonic title in years. We haven't had a Sonic 3D title in years. This will be the first Sonic 3D title in years.
I don't know how I'm going to do that particle.
Practical.
Yes.
Practical time.
Particle.
Damn it, there was an art piece I saw and I wanted to see it again, but they pulled it away and now I can't fucking find it. Fucking Twitter, I swear to God.
Lunch has been issued by the Eggman.
Eggman?
Eggman. Let's go in and the outlook is.
Alrighty.
Okay, I've done
I guess.
Walk fast. Jog. Run. Yeah, I've got run to do now.
Alright, let's get started. Let me pull up this here and then pull it away. That way you guys can't see what this is. What all have we done? When was the last stream? I don't remember.
Like a month ago now, technically?
30th. The 30th was our last stream. What all have we done since the 30th? Honestly, not a whole lot.
Stuff that we can't show.
Most of it is stuff we cannot show. I feel like we've done a lot, though, because we've not shown anything new in the past 3 dev streams. How's it going, Jim? How you doing today? Knuckles is funkless. Planet whip, planet whip, planet whip, planet whip. Revert, change. Revert, change. Revert, change. Updated rolling physics. Okay. We could probably show off a couple of new things. Or we're going to try to show off a couple of new things. A huge majority of the stuff we've been working on over the past, 2 months is stuff that we can't show because it's all fucking stuff we want to wait to show off, to reveal all in one go. Doing good. That's good to hear. I'm alright. A little tired, but I'm doing okay. Let's see. I guess the biggest thing that I could show off, because if I literally can't not show this off. I mean, I could. I can go and swap back the animation blueprint, but I'm not going to.
That's a little bit of hassle if you did.
It's kind of hard to tell on first glance, but Sonic's model is finally changed. This is the Generations model.
New animations. Look at those new idols.
As you can probably see with the double muzzle going on, which we have not had a chance to fix. Reese literally just pushed this change like an hour before.
Yes. I've literally started working on this an hour ago. Decided to finally get it started. We can start ironing out the bugs now.
Yep. As you can probably hear, there's like no footstep or sound effects.
As you can probably hear, lack of here.
Yep. No dust particles. That is because this was literally done like an hour ago, and it's not like we're nowhere near finished with this. There's also some topology issues with his shoes. They've got some geode look to them for some reason.
Yeah, they're not smoothed.
Sonic's got the double muzzle going on, which hopefully won't be too difficult of a thing to fix. But yeah, we've got the Generations model in finally. One thing I would like to do, before we get like too deep into the Gens model, could probably make an edit to it to do the back of the shoes.
Oh yeah, I can easily. I'll be doing that when I'm fixing the mesh anyway. It's an easy thing to update.
There's a lot of weird jittering going on.
That happens with the feet. That's just how it's going to be.
So yeah, the nice little thing about this is a lot of the animations that it's going to be using now are from Generations. Some of the animations we'll be using will be retargeted animations that we created for Infinity Plus, or were just in Infinity Engine in general. Like, for example, we don't have a crawl animation. There was no crawling animation in Generations, I guess.
Nope. You just slid everywhere.
Yep. So we'll have to retarget that animation. We don't have the skydiving animation for some reason. Even though there was skydiving in Generations, we just don't have that animation. Or that animation set. We don't have all the montages set up yet, so things like rolling won't look right. Because that used a montage. Same thing with jumping and stomping. So we don't have all the montages set up yet that we need, but we eventually will. One thing that's really nice about this is Sonic's walk animation is different. He's got like a nice little bob to it. Like he bounces up and down a lot more in this animation than he did in the original vanilla animations. He's got like a nice bob and bounce to his jog. It smooths out whenever he gets to a running speed. So like as he runs, he no longer bounces up and down as much.
Yeah.
But during his like walk into the jog, he bounces quite a bit in the jog segment of the animation. He also has his arm, like his hands open. Like his hands are open rather than closed, which I kind of like a little bit more personally. Oh, he doesn't have a skid animation. Like when
No,
he
because
stops.
it's a montage.
Yeah.
Anything that's a montage is not going to be there.
Yeah. Any montages is not going to be there. So yeah, another thing is the water materials have been altered. Again. These use Unreal's default water materials, right? Like for
This
Unreal Engine 4.26.
This is the water, the water plugin for 4.26's water materials. We enabled that plugin to do some testing, and it's not going too well so far. So I like the water material, so I stuck it on there.
Yeah, we were trying to play around with the idea of modifying the plugin the water like the water plugins that came with 4.26, allowing you to like make rivers and lakes and oceans and stuff like that. We wanted to modify it to follow the same system that our currently existing water volume does, except we had an issue with the collision. The character collision was not colliding with it properly. I don't know why. You would walk into the water and you would be in a crouching state because the character kept thinking it was underneath something. And we couldn't really fix it. Well, Reese couldn't really fix it. I didn't look into it too much.
I might try again sometime in the future, but it's not a priority for me. So yeah. I'm just dropping it for now.
It would be pretty neat. It would be pretty neat to get the like those new water tools functioning and interacting with the player character. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a story for another time.
But yeah. The material isn't final. We're gonna make some adjustments because you can't really see when you're under the water. And you also can't really see through the water either, like if you're on top of the water. So yeah. So what?
Sonic like proper blends into the surroundings when you're underwater.
Yeah, he's kind of the same. The similar shade of blue. So yeah, we'll definitely be modifying this material and this like blur effect. It's not final. This was done also like 2 days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. Messing around with this, yeah.
One thing you did, I remember. Breakable walls can now be set up to function with wisps. Why am I scrolling through the long way around? I could have just went backwards. How are you doing today, Lizzie? Breakable walls can now be set up to interact with wisps.
I don't know 100% if it's working. Did you patch it? Because it was very finicky.
Let's see here. You good? That's good to hear. Let's see here. Only Wisp Black Bomb. Alright, yeah, it's still a little finicky. It doesn't work perfectly. But, hold on. What are the others? Are the others set up for a Wisp? Yeah, that one's Grey Quake, and that one isn't set up for a Wisp at all.
Try the one that's set up for a Wisp, you can boost through, and it'll destroy itself quite satisfyingly.
They also use a new destructive system, right?
Yeah, it's using I don't think it's the chaos system, but it's the destructible mesh system.
They don't fly away anymore, which we'll probably have to make adjustments for.
They don't fly anywhere. I thought I meant it, so they did.
No.
It's not, yeah. They were flying away at one point, but I guess I toned it down.
Oh, they do break. It's just the particles don't play. Like you see it disappeared.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like it works, but for some reason the visuals only work one time per game, and then afterwards they just decide not to function anymore.
Yeah. Because
like the reference to the Wisp or something is messed up, and it just doesn't. I tried fixing it, but it's just not wanting to work for me.
It's really weird, but technically they work. What you can do is... Damn it. You can tell it if you want it to be broken by a Wisp only, or like only a Wisp. In which case, you just simply hit this and you select what Wisp you want. We're going to be changing this to be an array, so you can have an array of Wisps. If you want some Wisps to break walls but not another, we will be doing that. That it won't be difficult to fix that or patch that. I was thinking of doing it the other day, but while I was doing it, I wanted to do something else, but I needed a manual so for that other thing. So these will eventually be using an array of wisps that you can select from. Nom, 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 nom,
nom,
nom.
Ow.
You can also do like orange rocket here. So yeah, the breakable walls have been updated to use the updated like broken mesh system, like a shattered mesh.
Destructible mesh component.
Yep. You probably see these like red and yellow spheres floating around in midair. Not going to talk about those. So moving on. So moving on. I think we already discussed this before. Yeah, the zipline and the pulleys have had their gravity updated, so they function a little bit more smoothly now. It wasn't they weren't properly setting your gravity, but they should be now, so a bit better. I never really looked at the water material from this side. That actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks really nice from the side.
I like how it looks. You can actually see water from the side.
That thing over there. I put that plane there. It's just a different material. It's not actually the water material.
Okay, well, never mind. Fuck me.
Yes.
Oh. Let's see here. Oh, here's the thing. This was an object we had created way back with the Colorful Combat update. The anti-wisp volumes. Whoop. This is a volume that can be used to enable and disable wisps. Let's make that like 500 by 500 by 500. Boop. There you go. Anti-wisp volumes now have a few more settings. Instead of simply having one wisp you can disable or enable, you can have an array of wisps, and you can either blacklist or whitelist the wisps. So let's say we have 4 wisps here: red burst, green hover, spike, and let's go with ivory lightning. Let's blacklist these wisps. So if I have that wisp in my inventory and I enter the volume, you can see over on the left side that it's disabled that wisp. And if I swap over to blue cube, it's not supposed to be doing that, but it disabled the wisp. Oh wait, hold on. Did I set it up? Blacklist, disable blacklist. Remove wisp. That's weird. It's not supposed to be doing that, but it's in essence what it will do is it will disable the wisp in your inventory if you have it. So you can see I walk in here, disabled my green hover. We'll disable pink spike. Disable ivory lightning, and it's not supposed to disable other wisps, but I think it is at the moment. Nope. As you can see, I have cyan laser. I've walked into the area and it did not disable cyan laser. Cyan laser is fine. Orange rocket. Nope, orange rocket is fine. Crimson eagle. Nope, crimson eagle is fine. You can also do the inverse. If you hit this button to make it a whitelist instead, everything that's in the list instead of being blacklisted will be whitelisted, meaning only everything in the list will be usable. So I walk into the trigger. It does this still do the disabled like visual thing. It's not supposed to, but you can still use the wisp inside of the trigger. Yeah, as you can see now, it's also disabling all the other wisps that are in the list, or that aren't in the list. Like Indigo Asteroid isn't in the list, so it'll disable that. Cyan laser is not on the list, so it disables that. So it's the difference between setting up a whitelist and a blacklist. Same thing with being able to like disable or remove. If I remember right, let me open it up. How did I set it up? I set this up a little while ago, so I don't remember how I did it. Okay, yeah. If this is false, it just goes down here. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to do. It'll just simply enable or disable any wisp that is in the list. So if you have a wisp in here, or on this list, and you walk into the volume, it will either enable or disable them based on what's on the list. Let me see if I can still transform into some of these other wisps.
I don't remember we ever added those rank animations, but I guess we have them.
Yeah, so I'm inside where the volume is at. You can see there. It's enabled. Yep, I'm still enabled. Walk in here. Yep, can't use hover. And if I try flying into it with hover, it'll disable hover. But if I flew into it using void, void does not get disabled because void's not on the blacklist. Can I show the visibility? Okay, yeah, I can. So if I changed it to whitelist, yeah, the whitelist still doesn't seem to work. I'm not sure why it's not working. Oh wait, no, you have to put the disable whitelist in as well. No, still not working. But all right, it's not working, but that'll be an option. You'll be able to create a list of wisps that you are able to remove or allow once you overlap with the volume. That way you can more accurately like gate your your levels. Oh, excuse me. Essentially, it will allow you to be more flexible in how you want wisps to interact with your levels. If you want people to be able to like carry wisps in different areas, or if you want certain wisps to be in certain areas, and if you don't want certain wisps to not be in certain areas, and vice versa, things like that. That is essentially what the whitelist and the blacklist will allow you to do. You just got to make sure you know the difference between a whitelist and a blacklist, and as well as you got to make sure you set up the volumes in an area that the player will actually overlap with. Let's see here. That is not very descriptive.
What?
I'm looking through the pushes and I see a push from you on May 30th that says very small changes. And that's it. How you doing today, Void? We can show this here off with Chuckles. This is some work that Emmanuel has done with Knuckles. You're fine? That's good to hear. If Emmanuel is actually here, he'd be able to explain a lot better, but essentially, some adjustments have been made to the punching for Knuckles. Knuckles is more likely to hit an enemy now while he punches into them. As well as landing combos is also much easier. The third punch combo has also been changed into the there's like a corkscrew move. What is it called? Knuckles Heat.
Where he's like running into
yeah. That can be a multi-hit move.
Drill dash sort of thing, I think.
Yeah, it's like a drill dash move. Emmanuel changed how enemies interact with you punching them so they get pulled into your punch. Meaning, if you punch near an enemy, you are much more likely to actually hit them, especially whenever you're moving much faster. It essentially makes punching enemies more accurate. That's mostly just goes for the basic punching moves. To my knowledge, he didn't really do much in terms of changing the properties of the punching. So that's kind of basically it for Knuckles. Minor combat update. Hitting enemies is a lot easier, and you're more likely to land hits whenever moving faster. You can probably tell just from a visual perspective, like if I were to slow it down and I punched at an enemy, you can see like the enemy being dragged towards me a little bit. Nothing else was really changed with Knuckles. He kind of just had that update, which was mostly for the purpose of making combat feel better. Like, that was the main focus of it. Allow you to more easily punch enemies and things of the such. I feel like there's something else that we worked on. I can't think of it. Oh, here's another thing. Rings have been changed slightly. The ring actor now has 2 separate collision boxes for attraction. Let's see here, collectibles. Pull out a single ring. You can see that there are 3 spheres. There's an outer sphere, a middle sphere, and the most inner sphere. Actually, there are 2 inner spheres. One is for just an immediate attraction, and one's for collection. There's 4 spheres. This most inner sphere here is for collection. You overlap with it, you grab a ring. The second most outer sphere is for minor attraction. If you overlap with that outer sphere, the ring will just automatically zip to you, like so. You have the second outer sphere, which is for shield attraction. So you can set the shield attraction radius. If I were to change this number right here, 400, boop, you can see the inner sphere getting smaller. And this here is the radius for attracting rings via the electric shield. Bonk. So if I walked over to these here, you can see I can walk, I'd be decently far away from them. Oh wait, no, I think those have the attraction turned off. Yeah, I can collect that ring pretty easily. But I can be further away from those rings and attract them than I was with this ring over here. That's because I shrunk the radius down. And the outer sphere is for the boost radius, how far away that you can be before the rings attract you via boost. The default for the electric shield radius is, I gotta change that to be an instance-editable variable. The default for the electric shield radius was the old default. 500 units was the default for both electric and the boost. The new sphere for boost specifically is wider, much more wide than the what they used to be, like the default used to be. So I can hit lightning shield, and when you get it, all the rings go to you. I mean, yeah, you can, if that's what you want. Let me edit the ring spline real quick. This shield radius is meant to be instance editable. Boop. Gotta go. Oh, alrighty. Thank you for stopping by. The shield radius, if I made that wider, let's make that like 1000. You can see like it's a lot wider now, and you can just turn shield attraction on. I did rename a lot of them, so like is shield attraction, is light speed dash, is boost attraction. The naming convention makes more sense. It used to be is no shield attraction, is no boost. Now it's just is boost or is shield. The naming conventions make more sense now. As you can see, I can be quite far away from these rings now because of the much wider radius. So yeah. Yeah, that's what was changed with the rings. That will be part of the update. You can now customize the attraction radius for rings separately from the electric shield and for the boost. It used to be the same collision sphere. They used to just use the same collision sphere to the point where if boost was on, they would use the attraction sphere for the boost. If the electric shield was on, they would use the same sphere for the electric shield. Now you can have them as two separate things. That way, if you want, you can like have a much wider radius for boosting because you're more likely to miss rings while boosting. So if you boost across the attraction field, you will collect it from further away than you would if you had the electric shield, because the radius for the electric shield is smaller. By default, it'll be smaller, but you can change it to whatever you want. Let's see. I don't think there was a whole lot more that we changed. We discussed this last time, but rails, I kind of just like went over this very casually. But grind rails now have a new function for Ivory Lightning. Inside of the grind rail, you can hit this Ivory Lightning rail variable, and in doing so, the rail will become electrified. And electrified rails will deal damage to the player if they are jumped on without either being Ivory Lightning or without an electric shield equipped. So if I made my way over here, you can see this is very clearly an Ivory Lightning grind rail. Bam, I took damage. But if I grabbed an electric shield, I can jump on it just fine, no problem. Whoop. And if I grabbed Ivory Lightning, I can also jump on it and ride on it with Ivory Lightning as well. Technically, Ivory Lightning can run over any grind rail. Like, unlike most Wisps, Ivory Lightning is capable of grinding on any grind rail. So Ivory Lightning is very unique in that aspect. However, there are grind rails specifically made for Ivory Lightning that without an electric shield, only Ivory Lightning can use. I kind of just like perused over that fact during the last stream because I happened to have gone over grind rails during the tutorial parts. But I thought I'd actually dedicate a small segment to this stream for it because it was a pain in the ass to make. Like, that was just, it was annoying. Ivory Lightning grind rails has been nothing but a pain to set up. And even now, there are still quite a few bugs with it. So it's not finished, but it works a lot better now. So yeah, did you have anything you wanted to add, Reese, before I move on to some tutorial stuff?
For the stuff that I've added, you've already show. Besides animation stuff, as usual.
Oh, you did some stuff with the menus a little while back.
I did, actually. That could be something you could show off if you want.
I mean, I can do it without going to the main menu because it's mostly options related stuff.
There is another bit with the character select. You no longer choose like the character's abilities. That's been streamlined now. You literally just choose a character and then you go straight into a level.
Yeah.
Like, you choose a level, but that's something else. Yeah, the options menu I have worked on, and there is something on the main menu as well. Show off. I don't know, like, if you want to or not. It's in that extras.
What theme is the menu on at the moment? Do you know?
I can check for you right now.
So yeah, the option screen has been changed a little bit. As you can see, it's reorganized to allow like more options if you want.
It's on the heroes.
Okay, it's on heroes, then yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, the layout has been changed for the options menu. It's a bit more streamlined now, and it's hopefully going to be a bit easier to add extra options in a little bit.
Yep.
And when you select stuff, it tells you what it's doing at the bottom now, which is the detail I added in.
Yep. Change game settings, view extra content and credits, menu for another option, and play single player mode. So if we go into single player mode, you can see that there are the characters here, as usual. We select Sonic. There is no longer an ability menu allowing you to select your abilities. That was never really intended to be like a default function of the framework. That was more so just a system we set up to showcase Sonic's different abilities, mostly because mapping all of Sonic abilities that he could potentially have in the framework to a single controller is practically impossible. So we had to set it up so you would pick and choose what abilities you wanted, because we had quite a few abilities set up and we wanted to be able to showcase it all, but we don't see any real reason to do that anymore, so that option has now been removed. Instead, it just brings you to this menu confirming all of the abilities of the character and like the buttons associated with them. So some of them are not like unfinished, like Knuckles doesn't have anything on F. Q and E I don't think actually do anything. Some of them are not full, like air moves, space for Knuckles would be gliding, control would be drill dive. Knuckles doesn't have a shift mid-air ability. Like Tails' space air moves would be flying, his control air move would be dropping from flying. Q and E would be setting up and throwing bombs and stuff like that, so some of the menus aren't finished. However, as you can see, it gives you a showcase of everything that you can do. You just had to select again, and then it brings you to this menu where you can select your levels. So yeah, the menus have been altered slightly. Pray I do not alter them any further.
There was the extras menu thing that I added in, but I don't know if you want to show it now or leave it as a surprise for people.
Well, we could do that if you want, unless you just don't want to.
Yeah, it's up to you.
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about that.
Everything I added in, that's why it's in the extras menu.
Yeah, so for the extras menu, we mostly just added this for fun, but if you've seen the extras menu before, you know that there have always been 4 options. Credits, which shows the credit screen, which we need to update still. Extra 1 doesn't do anything, extra 2 doesn't do anything, and we had a sound test option here, and it never did anything. Until now, where you can now select different... does multiplayer work? No. Not at the moment. You can now select different sounds to play. Bam, bam, bam.
I spent a good, like, half an hour or so working on this. And I think it's so far. There's a few small things I need to iron out with it, but it's pretty good.
We need to get the credit for this cream sprite so we can stick it in the credits.
You what, sorry?
We need to figure out who made this cream sprite.
Sega.
Oh, wait, is this an official Sega sprite?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's from Advance 2's sound test.
Interesting. So yeah, if you want to have a sound test, we have like an entire menu set up for it, and you can also like just fill it with your own stuff, like populate it with your own songs from your own fan game.
Yep.
All the songs that are listed here are songs that you can find in the framework. We use them for different purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I think that was it for the menus now.
Yeah, for menus, that's pretty much it.
One thing I did, I remember now. This is not complete, and I wonder how easy it will be to set up and finish up. But we now have an alternative child to the goal ring, called the goal capsule. This has actually been an asset that's been sitting inside of the framework for years. It's been sitting in the framework doing nothing but collecting dust. I decided to finally make something out of it. It's not finished at all whatsoever because it doesn't have collision. It doesn't have a proper skeletal mesh because it is a skeletal mesh. It doesn't have a physics asset is the thing. Is what it doesn't have. But it's meant to animate, but it does function. It contains all of the exact same settings that the other goal ring would have. So if I were to jump on top of it, you can walk right through it because again it doesn't have proper collision. But if you were to jump on it, or at least hit the collision, it would finish the level for you. So yeah. We will be finishing this, and we will probably also be creating a version with a goalpost that you simply just have to run by. And maybe we could do something unique where the speed in which you run past it will affect its animation speed or something.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be difficult to do. But yeah, that's another thing I've added. It's simply just a child of the main goal ring. If I were to open it, you can see its parent is a goal ring. The only difference is it has different visuals, which at the moment it doesn't have any visuals at all because it's not set up to have any visuals. Still super unfinished, but it shouldn't really take too long to finish up. But now you can have an alternative goal rather than just a regular goal ring if you want. Have a capsule, an animal capsule you can hit. And maybe eventually we'll get the goalpost in. There was a thing you did with Super Tellus. Should we show that?
It's broken slightly somehow, but you could show it.
I don't see why not. It's fun.
Something a long time coming, you could say, for Tellus.
Yep. Tellus has also gotten some love in the super department. I like his little goggles. I keep forgetting he has goggles.
Super goggles on.
So if he gets all of the Chouse Emeralds and he transforms... he gets his little Flicky army.
The army of death.
And the Flicky army will follow him around. Tails is super bright.
I know.
Really bright.
Super material on the interface. Oh, yo, the flickers are actually kind of working. For me, they were jittering really badly.
So currently they don't do anything at the moment, but eventually we might set it up so that way they have a damage component and they could
actually do have a damage component on at the moment.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I think if you stand next to an enemy, they will start taking damage from them.
Oh, so they do. So yeah, if the flickies overlap with an enemy, they'll deal damage to the enemy.
Yep.
They don't home in on an enemy or anything like that, but...
yeah, we will be adding that though.
He's got the flicky army of death.
Tails has finally got him.
Although you know what this means, right?
What?
With the falling. companion characters.
With the whatchamacallit, sorry?
The little follower companion characters here.
Oh.
You know what that means.
No. I refuse to think about it.
Yep, it means nothing. Having little follower companion characters that follow you around, that means nothing.
Nothing at all. Nothing that we might have already tested elsewhere.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. If you transform and then detransform, the flickers will fly up into the air.
Yeah.
They just like fly away and then despawn. So if I detransform, they just
change. Yeah. They even change their
colors
back to normal.
They're
off the planet. Let's need them.
Yep. And there they go. They'll just fly up and then despawn.
They're flying back to Angel Island.
So yeah, Tails now has his Flicky Army of Death.
It took a long time, but I figured something out about floating followers like a month or two back, and then I was like, yes, this is exactly what we need for the Flicky army. And maybe other things. That was the most sus comment I've done in my whole life.
He's the most sus.
Sus.
What is a little sussy? I didn't know Tails' tornado attack had an electrical component.
Yeah, I think Emmanuel added that. It's got like a stun.
That's pretty neat. I like it. Although they are still stuck in the animation because
they've not been
the animation set. Yeah. Give him a bonk on the head, then they'll be fine.
Bonk and they'll be good.
What if flight characters ignored water friction?
I don't know. It seemed kind of broken to me.
Like,
I don't know.
Speed and power characters. Like, speed characters can avoid it by, like, boosting, but they have to be able to boost to avoid it. Power characters are kind of just fucked, I suppose, but, like, what if flight characters could ignore water friction and just fly over it?
I mean, yes, it would make sense.
It would make them pretty broken.
I mean, they can fly anyway. They're already kind of broken.
They could just, like, ignore ground effects like ice and water friction.
Yep.
As long as they're moving, not standing still.
Yep.
So, yeah.
That is Tutus with his new addition, which is
Goggles.
pretty cool. Oh yeah, goggles. The goggles are pretty cool. That's the only new addition to Tutus.
Tutus. Gotta fix his LODs because he's still got the triangle mouth.
Yeah.
Tails' mesh is so small compared to the other characters that his screen resolution size is harder to get right. Like, even at max zoom, he's using an LOD. You have to, like, move the camera up close to him. You gotta fix his LODs. So yeah, that's a thing. Tails has a little flicky army of death.
Finally has his flicky army. Super Tails is like 90% complete now.
Gotta update his materials so he doesn't blind you upon existing, but other than that, it's looking pretty good. And no, absolutely not. The follower characters cannot be used for anything else at all.
Nah,
we
cannot.
We cannot repurpose the follower characters for any other optional follower to fly around and follow you or do anything like that.
Any other type of small floating creature
that flies and follows.
Follows
small bunny rabbits.
Characters, yeah. Totally not.
Nope, can't be done. It's unfortunate, but no, it can't be done. No.
I only designed it for Flicky Army of Deaths. I'm sorry, guys.
They cannot be used for small characters that are gelatinous, like weirdly gelatinous, and
Onion
shaped and blue. Can't be used for them.
and Cry.
And Christ. Nope. Flicky Army code cannot be used for that at all.
Yep. So that's a thing. Yeah, that was from a little while ago.
Yeah, you did that quite a while ago.
Yes. I think I did that just after the last dev stream. It's been in the engine for a little while now.
It says worked on floating follower May 17th. That was before last
Yes,
dev
but
stream.
remember, I didn't do flickies until...
Okay, so yeah, here's another thing. Let me swap over to Sunk. Oh, I am already at Sunk. It's kind of hard to tell due to the fact that Sonic doesn't have an animation montage set up. But the rolling physics have been changed slightly. Rolling up and down hills is slightly more accurate. It's also slightly more efficient. It's less like what's the word? Laggy now.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly, not too much more. Although some of that lag is probably due to the jump ball actor, like the particle. Let me swap to a character that has proper animations, so you can, like it doesn't look weird. Swap back to Tillis.
It's gonna be fun.
So, rolling at a low speed is a little, it's a little bit different. Turning as well at lower speeds feels a little bit different as well. You can't immediately unroll anymore after you roll. Meaning you can't like spam the roll button. You're less likely to accidentally spam it and turn it off after just turning it on. Rolling down steeper hills also, I think, accelerates you a little bit faster now, so you can gain a little bit more speed from not as steep of slopes. Turning around from a slope is also a lot better. Like, I wasn't pressing any buttons there. That was just the natural, like, turnaround. Not a whole lot has been done with the rolling, but it has been modified and adjusted, so it should feel a little bit better, should feel a little less jank. So the rolling physics should feel slightly better for you.
Please work.
Please work.
I am doing more of the new model animations import, and they are very, very finicky.
Yeah, rolling at lower speeds feels a little bit better. This was stuff that was done quite a while ago. Emmanuel would be able to specify what it is he changed, but he's not here, as usual.
He's got a job now.
That's true. Emmanuel does have a job now, which is great. Let's see here. There isn't really a whole lot.
It worked. Yes.
I don't think there's anything new that we can really go over. So people can go ahead and ask any questions if you have any questions or concerns about anything that we've shown off so far. To quickly do a quick recap, Sonic has his mesh updated. He is now using the generations model. It's not finished, but he is using the generations model now. The breakable walls use a new destructive system. Like so. The breakable walls also interact with wisps. Like so. Hey, that one worked. That was weird.
Like I told you, it's very finicky, that thing, for some reason.
Yeah. We have a new animal capsule thing for for completing the level. It functions exactly the same as the goal ring. It's just you gotta jump on top of it instead of just touch it. Physics has been updated slightly for the zip line and the pulley. They feel slightly less jank. Tails has the Flicky Army of Death. I cannot transform. I guess the transform code doesn't work if you use the cheat to swap characters.
I never trust it, that's why I always switch.
The cheat to swap characters is very finicky. Tails has now a Flicky Army of Death that follows him and damages enemies.
We will always call it the Flicky Army of Death.
Yep. That will be their internal name, is a Flicky Army of Death.
Oh, don't worry, I've already made it many times.
Knuckles has had his combat updated slightly, so now hitting enemies is more consistent, more fluid, especially when we're moving at higher speeds.
Oh my god, let's go away. That's funky.
Yeah, you can see right there, like, as I turned, the enemy was being pulled with me. Yeah, it still got a little bit of jank with it, but when it does work, it works really well. As well as like a new triple move. He's got like the Knuckles Heat or whatever it's called, or the Corkscrew Dive or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
The Wisp volumes, the anti-Wisp volumes now have a few more options to allow for more customization. You can add a whitelist or a blacklist of Wisps. Meaning you can either allow or disallow a specific list of Wisps rather than one Wisp at a time, or all Wisps all the time. Rings now have an additional option for altering the trigger for lightning shield attraction as well as the boost attraction separately. Like, that is now two separate collisions that you can use and modify. Let's see. I don't think there's anything else for the recap. That's pretty much it. So we can go over a couple of smaller tutorial things that we didn't really get to go over last time in terms of like stage objects. Don't want to go over a whole lot of them. Mostly just going to go over the water volume and the character spline volume. For the most part, there wasn't really a whole lot of other actors. Oh, and there's also the cannon. We can go over the cannon as well. The cannon is super simple. If we go over the cannon real quick. This is like the tutorial part, by the way. So we got the cannon here. And the cannon has a couple of components. You can see there's a spline component here. This spline component is not important. It doesn't do anything.
Be right back, by the way.
All right. This spline component doesn't do anything. The sole purpose of it is this end is going to be positioned at the end of the cannon, on the inside of the cannon, and this end will be positioned wherever the player character enters this trigger box. So you can see this trigger box here. This is the trigger box the player has to overlap with in order to enter the cannon. This end of the spline will automatically be moved to the location of the character, and then the character will then move along the spline into the cannon. As you can see right here, whenever I walk up to this cannon, I jump into it, I get pulled into the cannon like so. That is achieved by simply moving one spline point to the character's location, and then moving the character along the spline into the cannon itself. So that spline component doesn't really matter. There's also an arrow component. I don't think that does anything at the moment. We were going to be using it for manual shooting or simple velocity launch rather than a projectile launch, but you know. Allow camera input. And input translate camera. This here, essentially, because you can also see there's a camera component right here that you can mess around with and move. You can tell it to use its own dynamic camera. If you turn that off, the camera will not be moved into position whenever the character overlaps with the cannon. You can see it'll just do whatever it wants. And I can move the camera around freely. Allow camera input. If I have that on, I don't remember about input translate camera, but essentially what that means is whenever I overlap with the cannon, I'm able to like shift the camera back and forth like so, even though the camera is being pulled away to a dedicated location and at a dedicated angle. Allowing camera input basically means I can still move the camera, but the camera, like I can move the camera's rotation, but I can't move the physical camera itself, like its location. It's being pulled to its area. You can set a maximum XY like angle that you're allowed to look at, as well as the input sensitivity. I'm not sure about the recenter delay. Oh, the recenter delay, like if you have this on and you move the camera around, how long it takes for the camera to recenter itself automatically after you've moved it, as well as the recenter speed. That basically means how fast it recenters itself after the time to recenter itself is up. Essentially, like if the camera is looking up in that direction whenever I overlap with it, and I move the camera to look over here, how long it takes before it moves back, as well as the speed in which it moves back, whether it moves back slowly and gradually, or whether it snaps back real quickly. That's what these two variables control. If you watched our last dev stream and the uploaded video, you'll know about the all the information about launch destination vector and the launch arcs and stuff like that whenever we went over springs and dash ramps and the swing pole and the dash rings, all those. All of that stuff is exactly the same. You simply set pre-calculated to true, and it'll do that. You basically use the exact same settings. You move this where you want it to be, or where you want the player to end up. Set the cannon arc, input delay, things like that. There's also a reset delay, which is how long it takes for the cannon to reset, as well as the reset speed, meaning how fast it resets itself after you've overlapped with it, because the cannon has to rotate to the direction it's looking at, or to the direction it's going to fire you wherever it launches you. And that's what the reset delay does, is it changes how quickly and how long it takes and how quickly it'll reset its rotation back. And the cannon cannot be used until it resets again, as like a safety reset protocol inside of the cannons. They cannot be used a second time until they have finished resetting. So these settings are important. If you have a cannon that you might jump into multiple times, the cannon has to reset before it will allow you to jump back into it again. There is also one minor difference between the cannons and all the other things. A cannon can have multiple launch destinations. This cannon here, if you turn this boolean on cycle mode, the cannon will cycle through a list of launch vectors. It will not allow you to launch until it reaches its destinated rotation. As you can see, it's going to rotate through the 4 locations, like one that's 3. This here is 4. Oh wait, no, 4 was a different one. That's a different cannon, I'm sorry. There's this one right here. If I turn this one here is the other launch destination. If I turn cycle mode off, you'll see it rotates down towards the camera as it uses that last point as its non-cycle mode origin. You can see it's facing the camera now. If I fire, it'll shoot me here because it was looking at this launch destination, which is not a cycle destination. As you can see with this list here, there's cycle list 0, cycle list 1, and cycle list 2. That's what this array here is. So if I added another, if I clicked on this here and I added another element, you can see cycle list 3 right here. I can stick that like way over here. It will then choose that one last. This does go in order. It will go through them in order that they are listed in the cycle. So it will always look for this one first, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. It will always do that, but you do have to make sure that you have a proper cycle list arc set up as well. Every actor or every destination has to have an arc. If I draw the debug, it's only going to draw the one debug. It doesn't draw for all the other debugs, unfortunately. But you can set up an arc for the last one. The arc here functions the same way as the other arcs. So there's this cannon arc, the default being 0.5. Essentially, it works exactly the same way. The smaller the number, the sharper the arc, and the bigger the number, the steeper the arc. And they are correlative as well. So arc 0 will pair up with launch destination 0. Arc 1 will pair up with destination 1. Arc 2 will pair up with destination 2, etc., etc. If I hop in here, you'll see it'll cycle through. Oh, I gotta turn the cycle mode on. Boop. They'll go through cycle location 0, cycle location 1, cycle location 2, cycle location 3, and then back to cycle location 0. Boop. And it will launch me based on that. You can also see there is a difference between some of these cannons. If I were to jump in this one cannon to the left of the start area, I jump in, pulls me in, lines a shot, and then it launches me. I did not manually launch there. It simply launched me after a set delay after reaching its proper rotation. Versus this one here, this one's going to rotate and it's going to sit here. And it's going to sit here until I hit the jump button. Boop. In which case it launches me. That is because you can set a cannon to have a manual launch. So if I select this here, you can see is automatic launch true? Yes, that means it will launch me automatically upon reaching its rotation. I believe there is a delay, like a rotation speed and a rotation delay. I don't remember where the rotation delay is, but there's a set amount of time that it waits before it will launch you. We will probably make that set amount of time editable. You can also set the rotation speed by default. I don't think 90 is the default speed. It might be the default speed. I don't remember. But essentially, if you set that higher, it'll rotate much faster. Another thing I forgot to mention about the cycle delay, you can see cycle wait delay here, set to 3. That is how long it will wait before it cycles to the next cannon location. So it'll cycle to this one, wait 3 seconds, and then cycle to this one, wait 3 seconds, and then cycle to this one, and then wait 3 seconds, and then cycle back to this one. That's what the cycle wait delay is. Oh, excuse me. Here it is. Automatic pause duration, this 0.7. That's if you have automatic launch enabled. So automatic launch is enabled
this variable here, automatic pause duration, that's how long it will wait before it launches you. So in this one, after it finishes its rotation, it will wait 0.7 seconds before launching me. If I bump that up to 3 seconds, and I hopped in here, whoop, it's going to rotate. And it's going to wait for roughly about 3 seconds before launching me. Let's see. There isn't really a whole lot else to go over when it comes to cannons. We do have a manual aim mode. I don't know if we will ever actually implement a manual aim mode. Essentially, the manual aim mode was supposed to function similarly to Sonic Heroes, where if you hop into a cannon as a power character, you can manually aim the cannon left and right and then fire whenever you're ready. We were hoping to get that in. I don't know if we ever will, though. We'll have to see. Let's see here. Like I said, manual automatic launch. If that's off, then you will launch whenever you press the jump button. Not really a whole lot more to go over. Cannons are pretty simple. Well, they're more complex than other actors. They're like, in terms of like springs or dash ramps or dash rings, cannons are probably more complicated than all of them. But unlike dash ramps and dash rings and springs, cannons pretty much only have one mode, and that is a pre-calculated mode. Springs and dash ramps and dash rings, you can have a basic launch power mode where they don't launch you at a set arc, they simply launch you at a set strength. Cannons do not have that at the moment. I don't know if we ever will do that. We will have to see. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'm not sure. If we do include a manual mode, we most definitely will, because including a manual aiming mode would require us to set up a launch strength power system rather than a pre-calculated launch pre-calculated launch arc. That's about it for cannons. Cannons are not super complicated. The cycle mode's more complicated. I don't remember if I set up any safeguards, but you do have to have the same amount in each array. If you don't, it will not work. You'll have issues. So if you set 3 location, like vector locations in the array, in the launch cycle list, you have to have 3 arcs in the array list as well. If not, it will probably break. I don't know if I set up any safeguards to prevent it from functioning in that event, but if I didn't, I will have to do so. Moving on from cannons. That was one of the big things I wanted to get done this time that I didn't get done last time. Let's head to the water volume now. The water volume isn't super difficult. There's water gravity, water acceleration, deceleration, terminal velocity. These are all things that your physics will be set to whenever you overlap with a water volume. So water gravity, your gravity is going to get set to 1. Acceleration, your gravity is going to get set to 750, things like that. If I were to pull this up, and if I were to jump into the water.
Hello.
Hello, Mario.
Hello, Mario.
You can see that number on the right. Gravity was 3.5 by default. Now it's set to 1. If I were to walk back out, you can see it's back to 3.5. My max acceleration was 750, or is 750 now. It was 2000. Now it was 750. That's what these all set. If you want certain water volumes to have certain properties, you can do so. Like maybe you want all water volumes to have this default stuff, but maybe you want something like Chemical Plant Zone where it has specific water volumes that are more viscous, so your acceleration is a lot lower, maybe your gravity is even lower, so you jump even higher than in regular water, but your acceleration is lower, so you move slower, things like that. And you could also set the friction to be different as well, so that's what all of this stuff here is for. This simply sets the physics related information, which is instance edible per water volume. I wouldn't suggest editing those unless you also edit the material. Like I said, the chemical plant example is a great example. Water and chemical plant zone would not be the same color as water anywhere else, so you would want to change the material to be something different, in which case it's a visual signifier saying, hey, this water looks different. There's a chance it also functions differently as well, versus this water. This water functions this way, you overlap with it, your physics turn to this. But this water looks different. It's more viscous, it's more thick, so your physics are different in it. Did you laugh at thick?
Maybe.
You can tell it to add friction. If I were to run along the water here with my physics tracker up here, you can see my friction will gradually increase from 8 up to basically 9, and once I reach 9, my friction is too high and my acceleration drops to such a point that I fall into the water. That's what friction does, or like hydroplane friction. The hydroplane friction rate, that is just simply how fast it increases. If you wanted to increase even faster, you would make this number bigger. If you wanted to increase slower, you would make it smaller. I personally would not change it. I think after a lot of testing, 0.05 is a pretty good rate. So if I've changed it to like 0.1, you'll notice that I am going to be... I'm gonna fall into the water much quicker because my friction changes a lot faster. Like, I dropped into the water much quicker because my friction increased at such a high rate. Versus if I put this to like 0.01, my friction is going to increase much, much slower. Oh my god, what are you doing? Why are you building navigation and shit? I'm not moving anything. Whatever, I don't care about the navigation. I'm not using it. Not gonna use it in this one. So if I'm running here and you see my friction increases, it's going to increase much, much slower because it's increasing at a much slower rate. However, my speed is still dropping because my acceleration is having a harder time overcoming the friction. 0.05 to me is the best, like, middle ground. Not much you can really do to change it too much. There is also ignore super, or super ignore friction. Essentially what that means is if that is on, that means if you transform into super sunk, I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna turn into super sunk. Let's swap to tails. Something tells me that if I turn into supersonic, it's gonna crash the engine. Because we've not tested that with this new dash. So as you can see, I'm running on top of the water, and my friction is not changing because I had it set to not change friction if you are super. Like so. If I turn that off, that means if I ran over it while in a super form, it would still increase my friction. What'd you say?
I didn't say anything. I just said a minute ago that it should still be fine to transform.
One thing you're gonna need to do. Inside of the component list, you'll see character track. That is super important. You need to make sure that this trigger volume encapsulates the entirety of your water volume, and then some. You need to make sure it completely covers your water volume. So you can see it stretches out to the water volume and with some additional space. This trigger volume is what tracks the player character. It basically says, hey, the player character is overlapping. Track the character's speed, track the character's friction, things like that. That's what basically allows you to submerge yourself underwater as well as track whether or not you can run on top of water. So whenever you're messing around with your water volume, make sure your character tracker encompasses the entirety of your water volume. And there's also the speed tracker. This is something new. This won't be in the Colorful Combat update. This is something that's going to be in the future updates. This speed tracker, you're basically going to want to make sure it's really thin and not super thick, and you're going to want to make sure it lays basically on top of the body of water. That's what tracks your speed for increasing your friction specifically. Like, this tracker will allow you to like fall into water. It'll enable and disable the collision. It tracks your speed and stuff like that. But this speed tracker specifically tracks it for the purpose of increasing your friction over time. That's what the hydroplane friction is for. There's also this box right here, this box collision. This is basically going to be the water collision. How far your water reaches down. Like you can see this speed tracker, that's how small the speed tracker is. It basically just covers the plane of the water. This here is the plane that the material is set to. This here is the character tracker that tracks your reference and sets timers and stuff. This is the trigger that triggers the friction, and this here is the actual water volume itself, how far down it stretches, and things like that. So those are the components of a water volume. You're going to want to make sure you understand what they all do before you mess around like placing water volumes into your level. Time to go over the character splines. I was hoping Emmanuel would be here for this, but he is not. So I'm going to try my best to explain this one. Essentially, the character splines is... Oh, what are you doing, phone? Be quiet. The character spline path is the blueprint that you would use primarily for either automation, or it could also be used for simply nudging or assisting the player. It is also used for 2D sections. The character spline path is a super important and super useful tool, but it's also one of the more complicated tools. Slightly, you know, I kind of have to mention this just due to the nature of this actor here. Despite what a lot of Sonic fans might say, automation is required in Sonic games. I hate to break it to you, but if you want a good Sonic fan game, or just a Sonic game in general, there has to be a level of automation.
Wow, can't believe this.
I know. How much automation is obviously up to the eye of the beholder. I don't mind automation as long as it's done correctly. I love the automation in Sonic Generations. I hate the automation in Sonic Forces. There's clearly a right and wrong way to do it. A lot of people tend to agree. Some people just straight up think automation doesn't belong at all in a Sonic game. That's just objectively false. I hate to break it to you. You have to have some level of automation. If you don't have any kind of automation, then that is where a lot of the jank in some fan games come from. And that's what these spline paths are going to help avoid. Essentially, depending on the settings of the spline path, you are able to simply assist the player by nudging them and pulling them in the right direction, essentially guiding them. You can make some settings so that way they can still break out of it. That way the player still feels like they have a level of autonomy. That means if they want to do it themselves, they can still do it, and you can set up the settings in the spline path to allow for that. Or you can set it up so that way whenever the player overlaps with it, they have to follow it. They don't have a choice. Or they do have a choice and they can make some adjustments to it, but ultimately they still have to follow it. Maybe like they want to do it at a slower pace or if they want to boost through it, things like that. There's a whole lot of different settings that are involved with the spline path. I couldn't possibly go over all of them, mostly because I can't remember all of them. But these are going to be super useful if you want to make some very interesting cinematic set pieces. If you want to assist the player in maybe a high-speed, difficult platforming section with a lot of like twists and turns. If you want to set up 2D sections, these are basically mandatory. You have to use these for a 2D section. Or if you want to set up like a cool challenging sequence, that these can be used for that as well. These are super, super complex, but they're also super useful depending on what it is that you want to use them for. To go over a couple of minor things real quick, similarly to so many other actors that we have here, these spline paths have separate camera controls. You can set up different camera controls for your spline paths to do different things. You can set up a spline camera, which this spline path, as you can see, there are two different splines. There's this one here, which the little blue things indicate the path of the spline. This is the path that the player character is going to follow. But if you look off to the side, you can see a second spline right here. That is just completely white. It's a bare spline. This is the spline that the camera will follow. And obviously you can edit these two components separately. I can move this around however I want, and the camera will follow this spline. Versus if I move this spline component around, I can move it around however I want, and the character will follow that spline. So you can always tell which one is which because the spline camera is boring looking, but the player character spine is much more interesting. They just visually look different. That way you don't get confused. You can also select camera spline components. As you can see, it will like select an actual camera spline. Dang it. I gotta click away and then click on it again. No, here we go. If I were to click on camera spline right here, I don't know why it pulls away. I think that's just the origin point, but it's meant to be this spline. But if I clicked the regular spline, you can see the origin point moved over here to this actual spline. One super important thing that you're going to have to set up, I think this is in Colorful Combat. I don't remember. It should be in Colorful Combat. If it's not, still pay attention because in the future updates it's going to be like this. You see this giant square right here? Like this square? Similarly to the water volume, this is a character tracking square. This is what we call the master volume, the master trigger box. That's what this is, the master trigger box. The player character has to overlap with that trigger box in order for the spline to be able to track the character. You overlap with that trigger box, the trigger box recognizes, hey, this is a player character. I'm going to copy this player character as a reference, and I'm going to track this reference. That's what this does. We do have a button in here. Right here, auto size master trigger box. You can hit that and it will auto size the trigger box to try and fit the entirety of the spline in it for you. It probably will not work. We're going to try and get it to work a little bit better than how it does right now, but ultimately you can just simply select that there, edit the box extent yourself, and set its point of origin wherever you need to. As long as it encompasses the entirety of the spline, your spline will work. That's all you really got to know. And that applies for any spline. Anytime you use any kind of spline, whether that be 2D sections, cart splines, nudge splines, you have to have that trigger box encompass the entirety of the spline, and ideally a little bit more. Like the spline, for example, starts right here. This is where the spline starts, but the trigger box extends out a little bit. That way it gives the actor time to actually grab and track the reference. So you always want to make sure it extends out just a little bit more. It doesn't have to be an exuberant amount, but make sure it extends out a little bit more to the point where wherever your character might enter the spline, it's able to grab that reference and track it. But the master spline, or the master trigger box, is vital. That's how you track the player character and how the splines functions. Without it, the spline cannot function. There is also an entry and an exit trigger box. I don't think any of... Okay, I think this one here uses one. Let's see your entry box. Okay, yeah, this here's the entry box, I think. No, stop it. Entry trigger box. Yeah, this here's the entry trigger box. I don't know if it has an exit trigger box. It does. Although I think the exit trigger box is really small. Or it's not active. I don't know. It might not be drawn at the moment. You can set a spline to be entered from any direction at all, or you can set it to be entered only from the trigger box. So if I go down to, let's see here. I want to say it's, okay, yeah. There's like an entry trigger box. By default, these are set to on. The entry and exits are set to on. You can turn them off if you want. By turning them on, it will expect the player to overlap with them. By default, we're going to settings here. It's not going to be called this. I had to rename some of these. I've recently went through and renamed a lot of these variables. So these variables are not going to be named the same thing in the Colorful Combat update. But this variable right here, Omni Entry, if this is turned on, if Omni Entry is turned on, that means that the player can enter the spline from any direction. So if I walked into the spline from here, this direction, or if I walked into the spline from this direction, or this direction, this direction, it's an Omni Entry, meaning I can enter from anywhere. The spline will then start tracking me, and it will start pulling me and do whatever it is that you set the spline up to do. That's what Omni Entry does. If you have Omni Entry off, and you should make sure you turn on the entry and exit trigger boxes. In the event that you do that, that means that the spline, you have to enter through the entry trigger box, and you have to exit through the exit trigger box in order to enter and exit. I don't think you necessarily have to have the exit trigger box on. I think the splines are set up so that if it recognizes you've reached the end of the spline, it simply lets you go, if I remember right. So you don't necessarily have to have the exit trigger box on, but you would have to have the entry box on because it's not expecting you to overlap from anywhere. And even if you did overlap from anywhere, it's not going to start tracking you because Omni Entry would be turned off. So similarly to the master, you can grab the entry or the exit trigger boxes, move them around however you please as individual components, and you can set their box extent right here to be whatever size you want. That meaning that the player character is more likely to overlap with them at the point that you want them to. Ideally, you would want the entry box to be at the beginning of the spline, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could have a spline that stretches out beyond the bounds that the player is ever actually going to overlap with, but overlapping with the entry or the exit trigger box will automatically snap you to and let you go of the spline. There's a line player to path. If I remember right, a line player to path basically means it's going to try its best to align the player to the actual spline component itself across the X and Y axis. So if I overlap with the spline and say that the spline trigger is really large, it will try to snap me to the center of the spline is what it's going to try and do. It'll essentially try to make sure I line up with the Z value of this spline as much as possible. Or I'm sorry, the X and Y values of the spline. Whatever point of the spline I'm closest to, it's going to try and line me up to. That's what line to path is. Auto recenter, basically this means that it will periodically check to make sure this character is still properly aligned to the spline path. It'll auto realign. Auto recenter distance means the amount of distance the player can get away from the spline before it auto recenters them to the center of the spline. So if it was like if I'm running along the spline here and I get farther away from the spine, as soon as I'm beyond this distance, it's automatically going to pull me back and snap me into the spline. If I like nudge far away enough, it'll automatically recenter me. If you have recenter turned off, it won't do that. And if you have the center distance high enough, I can like essentially like pull away far away enough to eventually exit the spline instead of being pulled in. But that assumes that essentially like That's if the spline isn't running in optimal conditions and you are being pulled away for whatever reason from the spline center. Ideally, the spline, depending on the settings of the spline should be pulling you to the center of the spline at all times. So ideally, you shouldn't be worrying about recentering yourself. Auto rotation, essentially, what that means is whenever you enter a spline, it will force you to face a specific direction. It is entirely visual, like your character will not rotate one way or another. If I enter a spline, I will be facing either left or I will be facing right or forward or backwards. Generally, unless you want this to be like an automated sequence, that could probably be turned off. The rotate direction here, the 0, 1, or -1, I'm pretty sure this is going to be 0, 1, or -1. That basically dictates which direction you will auto-rotate to. 1, I think, is along the spline. -1 is reverse along the spline. So if you had -1, you'd be auto-rotated it in the opposite direction the spline is facing, meaning holding forward would essentially mean you'd be walking backwards through the spline. It's kind of weird to explain. Disassociate the camera. Essentially what that means is if you have disassociate camera turned on, it will not take the camera's direction into account. So if you don't know what that means, movement in Infinity Plus is missile-based. It's what we call missile controls, where your camera, the direction your camera is facing is what dictates your forward vector. So if you're facing forward, like if this is the direction the camera is facing, that is now the forward vector. That's the left, that's the right, and the opposite direction of the camera is the opposite of the forward vector. Disassociate camera basically turns it into tank controls, except for the tank controls are dictated by the spline, meaning forward will always be what the spline dictates to be forward. So if I'm running along this spline is always going to be setting my forward vector to be along the spline. That is if disassociate camera is off. If disassociate camera is on. If disassociate camera is off, that means the forward vector is still based on my camera. Unless the camera is obviously modified with the spline. If you don't have it modified with the spline, essentially that means even though I'm moving along the spline, my forward vector may still not be aligned with the direction the spline is moving. So if I held forward, eventually I would stop moving because I'm trying to move forward relative to the camera and not relative to where the spline is trying to take me.
Hello.
Emmanuel, hello. Jesus Christ.
It is not 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What's going on?
My sleep schedule is fucked. That's what's going on. So we're doing this early.
I am sorry. I would have actually joined in earlier. For once, I'm partially available. Technically, not technically. Don't tell my boss. Hi, everybody. My air conditioning is out, and I've been kind of doing things, but I'm here.
Welcome. I have been terribly explaining the splines.
All right, crack knuckles. So this how this shit works. So first of all, you have to be me, and second of all, cry. Third of all, it works.
Yeah, it just works, as what's his name once said. I went over quite a few of the settings, not all of them. I discussed the master trigger box, the entry and exit trigger box, the difference between the regular spline and the camera spline, things like aligning the player to path, recentering, auto rotation, disassociate camera, omni entry.
Oh, fantastic!
I went over a lot of like the more basic functions of the spline. I've not been doing so well playing because constantly like hopping in and out would be annoying, and there are a lot of settings.
Change stuff in real time, technically, a lot of things. If you do the Alt S thing, you can like change a lot of settings.
Yeah.
But pain.
By the way, real quick, one thing that you're going to want to know is this sphere, or in this case, this cube that you see, these cubes that are drawn along each spline point, that is the affection radius of the spline, meaning if I were to decrease that, I decrease this to like something else, I don't know, 30. I cannot decrease that to 30. Oh, that's because I got the wrong one selected.
Ew,
Cube size, let's do like 500. You can see the cube or the spline is a lot smaller now, meaning I have to overlap with this trigger box in order for the spline to actually affect me. So if I were to hop out or hop into the game,
assuming you have the setting on that allows you to enter from anywhere.
yeah, that one has Omni entry.
All right. I do like that name better. That was good on your part.
All right.
Also,
so,
what is this? Sorry, continue.
So I've entered the trigger box. You can see that there's this blue sphere that's following me, but it's not actually going to affect me until I enter the blue sphere or the blue trigger box. And as you can see, if I hit Alt S and I select this spline path, I can't see the effects in real time, but if I change the cube size back to 1500, like so, and then repossess Sonic, let me just exit the trigger and then walk back in. You can see that the trigger box is a lot bigger now, and as soon as I enter it, that's when the spline starts taking hold. So that's what the different sizes of these triggers are for. You can also change them to be a sphere or a cube, depending on what you want. So there's cube collision. If I disabled that, they turned into spheres, as you can see, and then they use the sphere radius variable right here. So
yeah, if you want my personal recommendation, in normal 3D areas, you probably just want a sphere, because that takes care of most things. The boxes are best used for, like, maybe if you want to create a 2D section, or if you just have very weird size constraints, or if you're on a narrow path. But for the most part, a sphere is exactly what you need.
I would say a cube collision is almost required for 2D sections. Because a 2D section is going to be flat. Ideally, you want 2D sections to be flat. But you also want them to extend a lot vertically, when you can't really be flat and vertical with a sphere. You can only really do that with a cube. Yeah,
although there isn't yeah, you're right. Unless you have a specific 2D path, say those winding paths from Sky Sanctuary, and you only want it to be one way, for instance.
Yeah.
If we want, at one point we could go over how to make a closed loop of a 2D section. Those are kind of cool.
Yeah. Although at that point I'd probably just suggest use a regular lock spline, not a really 2D spline.
Yeah.
There is a difference, but I had not gone over that quite yet. Not the different spline types. At the very top of your settings here, or your spline, or where is it? Oh yeah, your settings right here. By the way, these are all going to be reorganized. This organization is not the same in Colorful Combat. I have completely reorganized them in this update, and honestly, I prefer this new organized system better. I think it looks much more clean.
You're a heretic, but you know what? I'm going to hold my tongue.
There's lock, nudge, turn, and none. I'm not sure what none's supposed to mean.
Oh, none just mean it doesn't actually really do anything to you. It does some basic spline stuff, like it can align you to a path or an entry, or it can prevent you from jumping, but it doesn't actually do any effects on you. It doesn't pull you in constantly. It doesn't lock you in place or try to turn you. That's more so for say if you want a camera spline and you don't want the character to be affected, you could use this if you really wanted to.
Yeah. Real quick to go over the rest of these settings right here before we move on to the nudge, turn, and lock stuff. There's can jump. If you have can jump turned off, pressing the jump button will do nothing. It completely disables your ability to jump. Can jump being turned on, meaning you can jump. So if you want an automated section that is entirely just you're moving through an area, you don't want the player to worry about jumping or accidentally jump or break things by jumping, you can turn jumping off. You can also disable the spline on jump if you want. We should probably turn that off by default, the default state be off. If disable spline on jump is true, that and can jump is also true. If both of these are true, that means your spline will no longer track you upon jumping. Let's see here.
Yeah, I think I have some sort of delay inside, so even if you're technically inside the trigger box and you jump, it should still prevent you from going back inside until you land or something like that.
So you
I
can
don't
see
remember exactly how to code it.
this here is a lock spline. It's kind of locked me along its rotation, and I can jump along it. Like I can just zip and jump around while on the spline. However, if I were to pop out and I were to change the settings, no, stop it. Disable on jump, repossess Sonic, and then walk back in. You'll see the camera didn't. Oh yeah, here's the camera. I'm moving along the spline, but the moment I jump, my camera snaps back, and I'm able to break free from the spline. It's pretty simple, or like pretty self-explanatory. Disable on jump, it disables the spline wherever you jump. If I turned off can jump, that means I wouldn't be able to jump. Active while airborne, it essentially allows you to enter the spline while airborne. With this off, you have to be on the ground. Or will that? It says here spline is still active while player is airborne. Does that mean it will track you while airborne?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, so like if you become airborne at any time, it'll continue to track you. I assume that also means it won't activate if you're airborne either, like if it's off.
Yeah, it completely bypasses you if you're airborne. I'm not sure if it works on a Wisp. I don't remember if I gated for the Wisp properly for that. At least for a player, you can test with Sonic if you press the moon jump button while you're on there, it should just let go of you.
Yeah. Keep jump aligned. I think that's mostly for like vertical splines, isn't it? Or
Keep jump when aligning.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. That's more so to do with
Oh, that's whenever you like enter the spline, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the point of that one, I'm glad I'm here now. So while you're jumping, if you happen to enter a spline while you're jumping, and you have say a setting that aligns you to the spline while you're doing it, if that button is off, you will just snap to the ground essentially to where the spline is. But if you have that true, at least for a lock spline, and obviously for the other splines, it doesn't really matter as much. It will at least try to keep you in the air and snap you in place at the same time.
Yeah, so if I jump into this spline, it's going to like snap me along it. You see, like it didn't respect my arc at all. I just kind of snapped directly to the floor. Whoop. Like it pulled me right into the spline is what it did. But if I were to pop out, select that, keep jump when aligning, repossess. I like to walk out of the trigger and walk back in so it can reset itself. And then I jump into it. You can see it kept my jump whenever I jumped into it. Kind of like that there.
Yeah,
it's
it's
a little
not
bit
perfect,
janky, but you know.
Yeah, because I have to I literally instead of using normal gravity, I have to use math to like approximate and like increment your up and down movement. So it's not perfect, honestly. It's just once we get into the splines that allow you to go up and down walls and stuff, that's the reason why I have this.
Yeah. There's also only activate when airborne. That's mostly just that it's pretty self-explanatory. It will only activate. It will only track the character if the character is airborne. Essentially, you would use that if you want to like if you're launching the character across the air or whatever, and you want to align the character to land in a certain area, or something like that. You know, that's what you would use that for.
Yeah, that or you could use that if you only wanted to activate. Okay, so to distinguish what it means when it says only activate, I'm pretty sure it means that it'll only grab you if you're airborne. If you touch the ground, I'm pretty sure it will still, like, as long as you're inside Spline and you touch the ground, it will still, you're still inside Spline. Because I think I actually used that for that one Spline that, like, wiggles up and up that wall. Yeah. And I changed it to that so that in case you're, like, touching the ground already, it wouldn't grab you.
Yeah.
A manual is here.
Yes, I mean,
my air conditioning is busted. It is like 96 degrees outside.
Oof. Yeah, I was talking to my mom earlier, and she's like, "It's gonna get to be 100 degrees this week." I'm like, "Damn."
You guys are lizard people. I keep seeing it.
It's only 80 degrees in my office right now. It's 79. But...
It is only 13 degrees Celsius here.
Jesus.
There's minimum spline speed. Essentially, the minimum speed you have to be moving in order for the spline to track you. If you simply want the character to always be attached to the spline, set this to 0. This means that if I were to move this up to like 5,000, and then I were to overlap with the spline, that means I would basically not be pulled onto the spline unless I'm moving above the certain speed. So if I like just slowly waltz up to the spline, you can see it's not snapping me to the spline because I'm not moving at the minimum speed. But if I run into the spline at high speed, it's going to pull me to the spline because now I'm moving above the required speed.
Yeah, this is more useful for, say, like nudge or turn splines where you want it to correct you. Obviously, at higher speeds, you appreciate that more.
Yeah. So that's basically for all these basic ones. So we can now go over the nudge, turn, and lock spline. So there are.
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry. Would you mind if I explain them?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. So as Fizz explained, there's lock, nudge, turn, and none, which are the 4 basic types. I'll go over none. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't try to turn you or lock you in place or push you back in. Instead, it just puts you inside the spline if it can. Like if you tell it to, say, line you on entry, it will actually move you on entry, but that's it. It won't do any effects to you or try to keep you inside for the most part, unless you have like auto recenter on. So really the best use for it is either A, if you really want Sonic to just be inside a place for a period of time but still have free movement, it's useful for that. Or B, which is the reason I made it, is if you say want a camera section where Sonic still has free movement, but you want the camera to be along like a spline path, that's what you'll use it for, because it doesn't actually affect Sonic if you tell it not to.
Yeah.
So that's none. I guess next I'll go over nudge. Nudge is pretty simple, actually. All it does is that it literally just applies a force to you from where you are towards the center of the spline. So it's kind of loose in many ways because it just applies a force. Obviously, if the force is really strong, it'll move Sonic really quickly. But if it's just a soft force, then it won't really try to keep Sonic in it, but at least it'll kind of barely nudge you. This is kind of a holdover from Dashin because we asked Galaxy we could look at his code, and this is something he used. Which, personally, I don't really like nudge that much for, like, keeping you inside all the time, because, for one, if it does affect you, it's really noticeable, and, like, kind of weird, but it's still better than nothing, and it can help a little bit. It's like, I kind of want to keep the player inside the spline, but not really have them notice. Like, have it set to a low number is my recommendation for that one.
So, like, as you can see right here, this spline is a nudge spline. Whenever I enter it, it's going to try and pull me, like, along it. And as long as I'm not moving too fast, it's going to effectively do that pretty easily. Like, I'm just tapping left slightly, and it's going to just ever so slightly pull me to its center, because it wants to nudge me along the spline. We've got this one set up to be pretty weak, so if I move really fast, you can see I pull away from it a lot better. I think it scales with your speed as well, so like the faster you move, the more it pulls you.
No, you're thinking of turn. This one does not. It's like it's honestly the simplest one, which isn't a bad thing. It means that people want a really simple one to just set up real quick. This is the go-to.
So if you basically just, I think a good example of a nudge spline would be like, let's see, what's a good example? In Sonic Forces on what is that level, Metropolitan Highway or something like that? There's that one infamous turn that people like constantly like fall off of, where if you just simply hold forward, Sonic will like move around. That's kind of like a nudge spline. It'll simply just try to pull you in the direction you're supposed, or like push you in the direction you're supposed to go.
Yeah, and maybe in the future I can add in a setting so that if it only activates if you're so far away from the center of the spline, that way it's not so indiscriminate, and maybe adding some speed scaling. But for now, that's how that one works. Turn is essentially Nudge's big brother. It's one I made. I'm not saying, once again, I appreciate Galaxy's help, and I'm not saying any of the code Galaxy made was bad or anything. It's just that with Affinity, I just wanted to adapt it more to what we were trying to do and expand it and stuff like that. So Nudge is perfectly fine. When I say Turn is big brother, I mean like it's just more complicated. Turn will try to actually turn you so that you're looking along the spline as best as it can, and it has multiple settings to say, look. It tries to look at the angle you're looking at, how quickly you're going. It can account for that too. You can change how quickly it interprets you to the center, or to look towards the center. And also, I made so that there's like two different modes of turning. There's a hard turn, like if you're really about to turn outside the spline, and then like a soft turn, where it's like you're mostly looking inside the spline, and you want to just slightly nudge Sonic's direction. There's that too. We can go over that later, but that's what turn does. It's like, I think Lightning is a slightly more natural turn, where like tries to, I mean, it's more natural nudge, where it actually tries to turn Sonic instead of like forcing him, but it's also more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also like a debug setting you can turn on for it, so that you can see like a line show up.
Full screen again.
A turn spline, like in this instance, I changed the setting to disassociate camera, which if you remember what I mentioned earlier, disassociate camera essentially means it changes it so that it no longer recognizes the camera as the forward vector, but rather the spline. A turn spline is great when paired with the disassociate camera function if you want an automated spline that is like speed gated, that isn't as restricting as a lock spline. Like in this instance here, I'm just holding forward, and the turn spline is doing a pretty good job keeping me along the spline path. It's not locked me to the spline path. If I wanted to, I could break out of it, but it's doing a pretty good job keeping me moving along the spline pretty naturally. Like, I was just holding forward throughout all of that, and it was simply just rotating me and pulling me along the length of its spline. That's because I had disassociate camera turned on. If I turn it off and I repossess Sonic and I go back into the spline, I'm going to hold forward. You'll see it pull me, like you can see Sonic turning. But if I move fast enough, it will no longer be able to like pull me fast enough, and you can see I can break out of it. So the disassociate camera is actually a pretty good setting to pair with it. And like Emmanuel said, it's basically a more complex and a more powerful version of the nudge that takes a lot more information. Like, it takes a lot more information and uses that. You can see right there, like, because I had disassociate camera turned off, as soon as Sonic began running against the camera, my movement started changing, and I wanted to move forward again because my camera didn't change with the spline. My camera said, hey, this is your forward vector, and Sonic's like, oh, wait, no, this is my forward vector. And it got to the point where my the strength of my forward vector, or the camera is trying to push the forward vector, overcame the angular momentum that the spline, pull spline, was trying to pull me at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the best one analogy I can use for this and nudge spline is that the nudge spline, imagine for the nudge spline, there's a rope constantly pulling Sonic by the weight towards the center of the spline. With the turn spline, imagine honestly a rope around Sonic's head, pulling his head towards where he's supposed to be going. Is the best way to look at it. This affects where you're looking, or where Sonic is looking. The nudge spline literally just pulls you towards it. That's the main takeaway.
I don't see the debug. I know there was a debug, like a debug line.
I think there's a general setting for turn on debug, and that turns on the debug settings for any of them you have on. So your screen is lagging behind, so I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it should be somewhere near the top. Is more general setting. There should be a
constant debug spline. I constantly show the up and side vectors of the spline, and then draw complex debug items. I think that's what I want.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, you can see right here, it's trying to like pull Sonic, and of course the color of the spline dictates how strong it's trying to pull Sonic on. Yeah. As well as like how well aligned he is with it.
Yeah, this debug was actually really useful for me to fine tune some things.
Yeah, and again, if I turned on disassociate camera again, you'll be able to see like the difference in which it's pulling me, because whenever I get around a certain like rotation, it doesn't have to pull me as hard. Like it's having a pretty good time pulling me because it's no longer pulling against the camera.
Yeah, at one point you probably make a debug arrow for the characters that shows where you're trying to move relative to the camera. That way, for instance, if you turn on disassociate camera, you can actually see where Sonic's trying to go.
Yeah.
Not for the spline, but I mean like just in general.
Yeah, that would be pretty useful.
Yeah. Also, hi Reese. I haven't actually said hi to you when you pop back in. I'm here.
Wow, rude.
I know it's the American in me.
All right, so the last one, lock splines.
Okay, so lock splines are simple yet also not simple when you start getting into the more nuanced things they can do. A lock spline will essentially just lock you to the spline and will not try to let you move like outside the bounds of it.
Unlike the nudge spline and unlike the turn spline, a nudge spline will like constantly nudge you. It'll apply a force. A pull spline will try to like interrupt your rotation and change your velocity. A lock spline would be like, no, you don't have an option in the matter. You're going to be where I want you to be. While the other two splines are more suggestions, a lock spline is not a suggestion. It's a demand.
This is not a Geneva suggestion. This is the law.
I am no longer asking.
Yeah, that's why I call it the lock spline, which is probably the best description for this thing. It locks you along spline.
A nudge spline is like
things that can knock you out of it.
A nudge spline is like, hey, if you feel like it, could you maybe go in this direction? If you don't feel like it, okay, that's fine. A turn spline is like, hey, it would be really cool if you went in this direction. There's a lot of really cool reasons why you would want to go in this direction. Hey, do this. A lock spline is like, no, you don't have an option. You're going in this direction now. You have to go in this direction. But I don't want to. Nope.
I
am a boat.
Now, of course, if you either have an extra trigger box or, for instance, you get to the end of the spline, it will, for the most part, like let you go. Unless some weird shenanigans happen, which we're not going to really talk too much about. But yeah, as Fizz mentioned, it locked you along it. And for this one, I highly suggest you turn on the dissociate camera, even more so than for the other ones, because if you do not turn it on, it gets really weird trying to control Sonic.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a camera spline. Like if you don't have the camera spline set up as its own spline component. Having a camera lock or like a lock spline without disassociate camera, it's going to get jank because depending if you have like a lot of twisting and turns and winding areas, it's going to be like, where's my forward vector? My forward vector is all over the place and you're just pressing forward. What the hell do you want me to do, you know?
Yeah. So you want to turn on dissociate camera, so all you have to worry about is holding W and S. And we'll get into it later, but if you're in the 2D section, it turns it to A and D, or left and right.
So like there's forward, backwards, and there's left and right. I can't press left and right here at all. It's just straight up saying no.
Yeah. Maybe in the future we can look into ways of making it so that you can configure it so that left and right will also be forward and back depending on how you configure it, but
yeah, I
feel like for the most part, or maybe just make so that if you're already holding a direction and you enter a spline, that direction is considered your forward, but that I'll have to change a few things. So for now, forward, backwards.
Yeah. The lock spline is also one of the few splines that has a subsetting called the cart spline.
Yes, that used to actually be a that used to be a separate spline type, actually.
I was literally about to say the exact same thing.
Fuck.
So a cart spline will pull you along at the set minimum speed that you set it to, regardless of input. Similarly to the lock spline, which the cart is a subsetting of the lock spline, it will pull you along the spline as you set it. And unlike the lock spline where you have control of it, the cart spline will not allow you to have any control at all. It will say, no, you are moving along the spline at the speed that I tell you to, or at the minimum speed that I tell you to. So if I walk into this spline and I just let go, it's going to pull me along at the minimum speed.
Yes.
However, I can also, I think with this one, I can hold forward and I can accelerate even more.
I don't think that one.
Yeah, you
I'll
can.
say if you want, you could. Oh, okay.
It's like boosting. It's not exuberantly faster, but it is faster. Same thing here. This here is a lock spline. It pulls me right up at a set speed. And I think this one also has like acceleration activated. So if I held forward, I would move faster. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you notice, it is possible. Like, the reason you ran up the wall is not because, you're going fast enough. The reason you're running up the wall, actually, is because there's some other settings I managed to science into existence that allows you to stick to these walls 06 style.
Yeah. So if I walk into this lock spline, this is a basic lock spline. It's not pushing me forward. I can move back and forth along it however I want. But I can Sonic 06 this. Or Sonic 4 this, however you want to put it. Essentially, I can walk up the spline.
Yeah, obviously, if you really wanted to, you can maybe change it so that the minimum speed is like 4,000 or something, or 2,000. So
you have to be moving before it locks you.
Yeah. But those are some things you can do with the lock and cart. Well, the lock spline, and of course also the cart spline. But yeah, it is not a suggestion. It actually tries to lock you in place. With the red one, you can try jumping into it from midair, but just please forgive me. But like the jumping mechanics, the air mechanics with these things are finicky because I have to manually actually interpolate your position using like a fake velocity speed I come up with. And it doesn't work for everything. Like for flying, it doesn't work. For gliding, it doesn't work currently because I would have to manually go in and make it so that it does something. So in the future, I'll fix that.
So yeah, these splines have a lot of different settings.
Yeah.
Just to like actually select it in the menu and show it to you. There's the nudge, which is over here. This here was the nudge spline. The nudge magnitude is essentially the strength in which it tries to pull you along. There's the turn spline down here. Distance for hard turn, basically how far away from the center you have to be before it starts pulling you much harder. The yaw difference for the hard turn. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean.
It's supposed to be like the difference in yaw between where you're facing and like the direction of the spline.
There's hard turn interp. I think that's the strength in which it tries to turn you.
If you're doing a hard turn.
And then there's a soft turn where if like you're not far away enough to warrant doing a hard turn, this is the strength of the soft turn, being how strong it tries to pull you along.
Yeah.
Speed scaling, essentially it basically means the hard and soft interp will scale up or down based on your speed. So the faster you're moving, the harder the interps will be, or the more powerful the interps will be. The minimum distance, I think the minimum distance means like minimum distance from the spline before it actually starts doing the soft turn.
Yeah, like that's the hard minimum distance.
Yeah. And then there's minimum turn speed, which I think we should probably rename to like hard speed or something, which means the minimum distance from the center of the spline before it starts doing the hard interp rather than the soft interp.
Yeah.
Maybe? No, the minimum speed you have to be moving. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
This is the minimum speed you have to be moving before it starts pulling you.
Yeah, and also, as you can see, like, for instance, there's another setting called turn camera enter speed. Essentially, I made so that, like, if you don't dissociate the camera, so the camera does, like, it's separate, you can make so that the camera actually has a configurable, like, interp that actually tries to pull you away from or towards the direction you're trying to look. So you can change how powerful the camera actually is in terms of moving where you're looking. That's what that does. Inverse scaling just reverses the speed scaling, so the slower you're going, or the faster you're going, the less powerful the turning is. Stuff like that. And what's that other one? Speed scaling molt only if you have to mouse over. I don't remember.
Only if above speed.
Yeah, it pretty much means that you'll only it pretty much makes it so that the speed scaling multiplier only applies if you're going above that minimum turn speed.
Yeah.
Right there.
The turn.
The custom speed scaling speed. That's what I meant to say.
The turn setting has a lot of settings. Nudge has one setting, being the nudge magnitude. And then lock has a couple of subsettings as well. We didn't really go over this a whole lot, but the lock has two subsettings. There is the cart, and then there is 2D. There is a difference between them, and why you would want to use like 2D over just a basic lock, because activating 2D will activate the 2D camera and the 2D camera spring arm components. As you can see, there are like two camera components. There's a spline camera and a 2D spline camera, and each of them have their own settings. If I go down to, what is it? Spline? No, that's spline shape. Settings, lock, we have 2D, cart, or spline gravity. Which, by the way, the earlier whenever I was jumping along the spline, that's what spline gravity did. It basically pulled me along. It acted as if the spline had gravity, and it pulled me along the spline whenever I would jump. That's what spline gravity does.
Yeah, essentially.
If I selected this spline, you can see spline gravity is turned on right here. Essentially, it means, oh, it's pretending this spline has gravity, so if I'm moving along the wall and if I jump, I will be magnetized back down to the spline. But
yeah, Mario Galaxy.
If you look over at this one here, you can see cart is turned on. There's a bunch of cart settings. Cart minimum speed. This is the minimum speed in which it will push you along. So as soon as you enter, this isn't minimum activation speed. This is minimum speed in which it will pull you. If you want the minimum activation speed, you would have to change this one here, the minimum spline speed, which I might rename to activation speed. Cart minimum spline speed, that means the minimum speed in which it will push you along the cart spline. As soon as you enter it, it's going to accelerate you up to this at the very least. There is a maximum cart spline speed, which means the maximum amount of speed that you can reach, in which case it's 1500, which is the maximum speed you can reach while going Mach 3. You can also do cart fixed speed or cart cruise control. Cart fixed speed means it will try to push you along this cart fixed speed, meaning it won't allow you to accelerate or decelerate, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Cart cruise control, having both of these on at the same time doesn't make sense. Cart cruise control will mean it will, I think what that means is it will take the speed that you entered at and use that as the minimum speed. And as you accelerate, it will continue to use that accelerate as the new minimum speed until you let go, in which case it will just continue to move. It acts like cruise control, essentially, if you know how to drive a car.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Pretty much, the idea of the fixed cart speed is that if you turn that off, it will mean that whatever speed you enter the cart at between the minimum and maximum, you will keep that speed if you turn off cruise control.
Turn on
like cruise control. Cruise control allows you to actually change your speed and accelerate and decelerate, within the limits. While in the spline. If you turn that off, cruise control, you cannot change your speed while in the car spline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then fixed cart speed, like you said, it pretty much makes it so that instead of having a variable minimum speed that you can, because if you turn off cruise control, whatever speed you will enter the cart at will be your speed until you exit it. So if you have fixed cart speed and it's at 5,000, if you enter that spline, your speed will be 5,000 no matter what, even if you're entering at 10,000 miles per hour or 0 miles per hour or speed per hour, I don't know. If you turn fixed cart speed off, your your speed will actually dictate your speed while inside the cart, depending on your minimum maximum cart speed. A bit complicated, and even I forget at times, but yeah.
Alright, the other settings are the 2D settings, which if you turn on 2D section, if I come over here to our 2D section over here, you'll be able to see the 2D section settings. 2D section is turned on. We have 2D section direction, which that can either be, I think, just 1, 0, or -1.
You want it to be 1 or -1, trust me.
1 or -1, which essentially means you'll be moving one direction or you'll be moving the other direction. I'm pretty sure that simply just affects your rotation.
Yeah, it affects the rotation of your the camera. Because for instance, in the 2D section in a 3D area, your concept of right depends on which direction you're looking at the 2D section from. Because we're looking at it from this direction. Obviously, if we turn the camera 180 and the 2D section is meant to be viewed from that direction, you will want to flip the 2D direction of the spline also.
Welcome back, Lizzie. So like if 2D direction was -1, instead of the camera looking from this side, it would be looking from this side. Like the camera would change sides of the spline it's looking at. There's camera offset, which you can set an X or Y offset, which obviously X being left and right, Y being, I think, forward and back. Although it's a 2D vector, meaning is it just up and down and then left and right?
Yeah, Y should be up and down, X should be left and right.
Yeah. This here is a special vector. It's a 2D vector, unlike regular vectors, which have X, Y, Z, forward, backwards, left to right, up and down. A 2D vector only has left and right and up and down. Y becomes the up and down instead of Z, and X becomes the left and right instead of Y. Usually X is forward and back, Y is left and right, but in a 2D vector, X is left and right, and Y is up and down, with Z not existing.
If you ever took geometry, this should, or really anything beyond geometry, this should be familiar.
Yeah. There's the blend in and blend out time. All these are pretty basic camera settings. Default camera zoom is how far away from the spline it is. 2000 is a pretty decent camera zoom. 2D camera rotation offset. This one is finicky, like really finicky. You don't want to make these numbers very big at all. Like I'm talking like no bigger than 15. None of these should be any bigger than 15.
If you go to that cart 2D section I made where that spring and hover are, you can see that, an example of it being rotated slightly.
Where?
It's like where if you take that rail that goes across the wall jumping section.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Across the lake.
The other spline.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can see there's like a camera rotation offset of 25 on the Z-axis. Essentially, that means the camera will look more like this rather than directly head on. So rather than the camera looking head on, it'll look at a rotation along its Z rotation, like this. So not this.
Yeah, sorry, I should probably change that at some point so Z is up and down, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's rotation. Technically, that makes sense when you think about it from a rotation perspective, but that's just a problem with Unreal Engine. Rotation variables look exactly the same as vector variables whenever viewed on the detail screen. If you're not looking at it in a blueprint, it looks exactly the same as a vector variable. It's really weird. So X, Y, X being your roll, Y being, like, I can't roll the camera in editor, but Y being the pitch, X being the roll, Z being the yaw. So like this is Z, this is Y, X being the roll, meaning I can't change that. Well, in editor, so I can't give you an example.
Imagine like tilting your head to the left and right. That's roll.
Yeah, roll would be like tilting your head left and right versus, so those are the basic settings. 2D sections are pretty simple.
Well, they're simple, but this is the reason why I was working on that config spline button, because there's some settings default settings you really want to turn on or off for these things.
Yeah. There's a big button you might have noticed earlier, config spline. We haven't finished it yet, but this button, if you press it, depending on what you have the spline path setting to, it will auto-populate all of the settings with what we suggest are best default settings for that type of spline. But that is entirely dependent on us. If you hit this button, it's not going to save the settings. It's not going to make those settings unchangeable. You'll be able to change and alter the settings you want afterward. You'll just have to go in and change them manually.
Yeah.
This config button will essentially be the button that you press if you want to use the basic default suggested settings that we have for each type of spline. Because, for example, I would highly suggest disassociate camera be turned on for both lock and turn, but for nudge it doesn't matter too much, so maybe it would be turned off for nudge. Like if I had this spline set to nudge and then I hit config spline, that setting might be off by default. But if I had it set to lock, then that would be turned on. Versus activate while airborne, again, that's a setting that doesn't really matter in the nudge spline, so it will probably be turned off. It doesn't really matter too much for the turn spline either, so I would probably have it turned off. However, for a lock spline, that could be pretty important, so I would probably turn it on for a lock spline. So that's what the config spline button will do eventually. We started working on it, and then we just haven't went back to it.
By we means me, because I've been distracted, and also I've just been away for a few days. What about this? It will be done by the time this update comes out. if Fizz is like, hey, this update's coming out in 2 days, he didn't say that. But
No,
if
I
he
did
did
not.
say that, I would like jump and make sure at least this is done.
Yeah.
Because this is important for people.
We wanna get Planet Wisp done before we get this update out. And
Yeah.
we also want Whisper to be animated, which we're still waiting on animations for.
Yeah. Animations take a while.
Yeah. Speaking of Whisper, nothing. That's it.
No.
I did do some stuff with Whisper, but I'm gonna have to talk to Emmanuel about it, not everyone on stream. So,
I did some things too. I wanted to talk to you about Fizz, and I asked him to reach his help with something. Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
You need my help? God, you're desperate.
God, you're pathetic. You home alone on Friday night.
God, you're pathetic. All right. So yeah, I don't think there's much of anything else that we're going to be going over in this stream. Did you have anything else over the splines you wanted to talk about? I think we kind of went over. Yeah.
I mean, there's also like camera controls, but I imagine either you want to go over that later or you already did.
Well, that's the thing. Camera controls. We've kind of made it. There are a select few things in this framework that multiple actors share that we have kind of just made uniform. Camera controls in the Canon, camera controls in the camera splines, and the dynamic camera volume, camera controls in the splines, or the character splines, they all have the exact same settings. So
yeah.
The settings for one are going to be the same for the settings for the other. It's
also in the future.
If you understand one of them, then you'll understand the others.
Yeah. Also, sorry, but Fizz, next time we do something like that, we should probably make them like their own like components. And that way we don't have to like copy paste the code, because that's what I had to do. And I didn't realize until I saw something on Unreal that said, oh, I want most of things, like, easier said than done, but it's something we should shoot for if we ever.
I've mentioned actor components several times in the past.
We've used them before. Like Fizz used it for like the homing attack stuff. But
and you used it for the combat. The combat's an actor component.
Yeah, I just didn't think I just didn't think to do it for this, and I think just in future, at least for me, I should be more mindful. So hey, if these things share these utilities, let's just make a component and see if it works.
Component. Yeah, we could probably do that. Yeah. It shouldn't be too difficult to.
Yeah, we don't have to now because at least for the user, it doesn't matter. But yeah,
I mean, we could still add it as a component. That way, if someone wants to create an actor, they could just simply add that component to it and have all the same features as all the other actors. We could still do it. Probably not this update. It probably will not be out this update. But if we wanted to, we could do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, there isn't really a whole lot of anything else to go over.
What's that rail doing there?
Grand rail? Oh, Reese was messing around with the
With the what, sorry? Oh, the grind rail, it's like a loop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just testing if you can actually go around a loop.
Which you can.
Yeah, also, really quickly, go to like that one grind rail where you're saying, oh, like you can move faster than when you're boosting. Because I'm pretty sure if you just change like the minimum speeds or whatever, or the accelerations for when you're boosting and not boosting, that would fix it. Because I'm pretty sure that's the issue.
What, the minimum speed? What do you mean?
Because remember, the grind rails have like a speed for when you're boosting and when you're not boosting. I'm pretty sure what's happening is that the speed when you're boosting is just slower or the same as when you're not boosting. Or the acceleration, either or.
It says minimum rail speed 500, minimum rail speed boosting 1700, max rail speed 3500, maximum rail speed boosting 5000. You can move a lot faster than 3500 when just simply holding forward. You can also move a lot faster than 5000 when simply holding forward. Like, this rail here, its settings are pretty standard, but you can still accelerate beyond that. So I don't think it's the settings that are the fault. I think it's the fact that the settings are not being referenced properly.
Oh, okay.
Because it says right here, max rail speed 3500, meaning you should not be able to accelerate beyond 3500 if you are not boosting, but yet I'm kind of zippy on it, if you know what I mean. I'm a zip a zoom.
Yeah, I do see what you mean. Bazinga. How about that?
Hey, look at me. I'm a zip and zoom.
Oh.
It's so weird not listening to Sonic. footsteps every time he walks. That's so weird.
I fixed it now.
Oh, you fixed it already?
Fixed it a
Oh
little
wait,
while ago.
Reese, you started working on the ABP. I think I saw that Discord thing.
We are
Unless,
missing a handful of animations. I've informed my guy, and he is going to go and get the skydives when he's got the time.
Okay, cool.
But
Also, I do like
crawling
that
doesn't
sunken
exist.
loop over there.
The what?
There's a sunken loop in the water.
Oh, the shuttle
Oh,
loop?
yeah. I just
Yeah.
put that there because I was looking at how like depth looks with that water material. That's what fades into it, but you can actually run around that loop. It works perfectly fine at an angle.
Yeah, I would assume the loop correction setting or things probably help with that.
Oh yeah, it's cool.
Oh yeah, that thing. I'm gonna have to remember how that thing works before I explain that.
You gotta move kind of fast to do it though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That is kind of cool, actually.
I can't get it to work.
You just gotta be fast.
Well, your mom. How about that?
Oh wow. This is what I gotta put up with.
Oh no.
This is
Hostile work environment.
Great. Next will be a report about a hostile work environment.
Fizz and me whenever call Reese British.
That was like one of the jokes that made me laugh quite out loud when I first watched that movie.
Yeah, it's a good joke. I like
Great. Next
Robotnik
video,
may be
report about
evil, but he's
hostile-
not Activision Blizzard.
He didn't want to mess with the fucking human resources, dude.
Just Toby on your ass.
Turbure, ready to work.
That's Toby.
Yeah,
That's
man,
right.
did you see the new destruction component, breakable walls?
Oh no, I haven't. I actually haven't pulled changes in a bit.
Of course you haven't. Guess why?
Yeah, that's like my thing now.
Thing to not pull the changes anymore.
Hi, new update for a manual. Updates for pulling changes. No.
Pulling changes.
It's gonna get to the point where a manual doesn't ping in the GitHub for pushing changes. It's gonna ping in the GitHub for pulling changes now. I pulled changes.
Great.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's gonna be about it for this stream. This stream was kind of half a dev stream, half tutorial stream. Because we did actually go over a couple of things, and we did teach about the last couple of stage actors. To my knowledge, there isn't really a whole lot more in terms of stage actors we can go over outside of the buttons and the switches, but we've already been going for about 2.5 hours. I don't want to dedicate any more time to going into that stuff. We can... You have a question? Yeah, you can ask. Go ahead.
Lizzie, the slime maid. Yeah, question. Go ahead.
I am all of me.
I can ask later. No, you're fine. I don't mind. You can ask right now.
That's what the end of the stream is for, anyway.
Yeah, we save all questions for the end of the stream, so you can do that.
Yeah. Well, most questions.
Yeah.
Where did it go? There it is.
Did y'all talk about the Sonic Frontier stuff, or
Not on stream, no.
okay?
How do I change Sonic's model? That is a lot more complicated question.
Actually, it's not too bad if you just go to the Sonic's blueprint. If you wanted to really quickly change it out.
Yeah, I can show it real quick.
It'll be bad.
You're gonna need a new Sonic ABP probably, like a new skeletal mesh. You gotta import the skeletal mesh, get your skeleton. Unless the skeleton unless you like major model around the already existing Infinity Engine skeleton, in which case you could probably just assign that skeleton to the mesh. I think you would still have to create an ABP out of it. I'm not sure. Would you, Reese? Like, if you got a new skeletal mesh, you had to create a brand new ABP, or yeah. You'd have to create a new ABP, and you'd have to like recreate all of the animations. If you created a new mesh, but you created it with the already existing skeleton, and then simply whenever you import it, you assigned that skeleton to the mesh, You should be able to retarget all the animations without any problem, because it is the exact same skeleton, and if the mesh was made with the skeleton in mind, then ideally you shouldn't have any problems, but ultimately you would still have to create an all-new animation blueprint. You'd have to copy over all of the settings in the animation blueprint, and like all the code and stuff, and then you would assign the animation blueprint either in Sonic's blueprint specifically, or you could also do it in the master BP, which I think Sonic inherits from. I don't remember.
We have a master animation blueprint, kind of, right?
No,
not really. You can't really make masters of animation
ABPs,
blueprints.
just because it's so it's dependent on its parent animation so much that like
you essentially the easiest thing you can do is obviously create a retarget rig from the original Sonic model, and then you attach it to the new model, and then you're able to retarget the entire animation blueprint to the new model, and that's the way to get like a bunch of animations done quickly. But it all depends on the skeletal structure.
Yeah.
If the skeletal structure doesn't mess up, the animations, like if it doesn't match up, I should say, all the animations are going to mess up tremendously. We have ran into the problem like hundreds of times while I've been working with a Sonic mesh.
Creating and setting a new mesh can, if you don't know what you're doing and you're not familiar with how ABPs and skeletons and retargeting and all that stuff works, if you're not familiar with that, it will be one of the most painful experiences of your life. And even if you are familiar with it, it could still be one of the most painful experiences of your life. We have constantly run into issues retargeting animations, getting scaling issues figured out, getting skeletons to properly pair with the meshes. It's not fun. It's not a fun situation. Unless you know what you're doing and like that's something you do for like a living, or you have a lot of training in it, in which case it will probably be pretty simple and easy for you. But if you are asking that question, that probably means you don't. What Reese and I have told you are like the bullet points, the basic bullet points of how you would do that, but that is not something I can simply just show you how to do real quick and easy, because it's not real quick and easy.
Infinity supports channel.
Yeah. Like I said, or like what Reese said, creating like a retarget rig and completely retargeting the animation blueprint to the new rig using the new model. That will get all the animations retargeted and set up in the new animation blueprint, but you would still have to copy all of the code in the animation, or the old animation blueprint, into the new one. So that way, like things like all the locomotion and all of the like things for the spring bones, things for the individual's bone rotation for things like tilt and stuff like that. Things in the event graph for tracking booleans inside of the character and stuff like that, because all that stuff needs to be set up, because that's how animation blueprints work. You cast to the player character that it's using, and then you get all of the information from the player character to set booleans and variables and floats, like just different variables like booleans, floats, integers inside of the animation blueprint, and then the animation blueprint then works off of that. So it's a multi-step process, and it's not easy. It's very time consuming. However, if you can get it set up and you know exactly what you want to do, it can be pretty great once it works. Another thing you're also going to have to do is you're going to have to it'll retarget all the animations, but another thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to recreate all the animation montages that exist inside of the blueprint. So you can check that. I believe there's a structure for all of that, isn't there? Like for certain animations? Or is that all set in the speed parent?
For what exactly? Sorry, I was reading a message from
like certain animation montages for things like rolling and wall sliding and things like that? Is that in the structure, or is that all in the speed parent as separate variables?
It's supposed to be, the majority of it is in a like character animation structure that's shared amongst everyone, but the more specific things like boosting or stomping is meant to be for just speed parent.
Okay. So yeah, you'll have to make sure with the new animation blueprint and all the new animations you retarget to, you'll have to create animation montages to replace the existing one that way, or existing ones that way you can do things like rolling or stomping or wall sliding, things like that. Because those aren't handled in the ABP, those are handled in montages. And that's going to be like part 2 Electric Boogaloo of swapping the mesh. It's really not fun. Hopefully that answered your question. The next dev stream will be on the 27th. We will probably be going over the button interface objects, as well as editing basic character information. Things like boost speed, jump height, character structure stuff, like certain abilities, active, things like that. We'll probably be going over a lot of that in the next one, for like the next tutorial, if that makes sense. That way, because like that's another like set of questions a lot of people have been asking is like, oh, how do you change the jump speed or the jump height? How do you change the maximum speed? How do you change this or that? You know, and a lot of that stuff are basic variables and that exist in the engine that can be changed. You'll just have to know where to find them, and we can go over that next time. So, were there any other questions? And did either of you have any more comments?
I don't.
No.
All right. Last call for questions before we close things up.
Last call. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm going to go pee real quick. Give people time to ask their questions, so give me like 1 moment.
I swear it sounded like you said I'm going to go be reverse. Sorry, it's not so simple, Lizzie. It's just how it works. Sorry.
It's very finicky to swap the mesh out.
Yeah, because like a lot of stuff is made.
Animations.
Yeah, because a lot of stuff is made for like a specific character. I wonder how they do it. Like, imagine like you're making a big game. Like, do you?
Big
God, I don't want to kill myself. So, like, imagine you're making like Fortnite and you want to put Thanos in. Like, do they have to do all of that, or like, do they have a pipeline where it's simpler? Like, I wonder what they do to make it.
Definitely gonna have a pipeline that's simpler, but I would imagine the majority of the animation is shared, and then they just edit individual ones, like we've been planning to do.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the skeleton meshes for most of them are the same.
There is something I'm hoping works for us, because it would make animating Sonic 10 times easier for us. I'm not going to test it though until I'm done with a model, because if it doesn't work, it's not a big deal. It'll just be pain for us yet again.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Your mom.
Your mom. Doing your mom.
Doing your
Alrighty.
mom, dude.
Well,
I think that's it.
if there are no other questions, we're going to call it good here. Next dev stream. Trying to get 06 Sonic in. Oof, good luck with that one. Next dev stream will be on the 27th. I'll try and get this video out whenever I can. Probably expected by Thursday if I had to guess. Because we did go over some tutorial stuff. Next time we'll go over more tutorial stuff. But let's call it good here then. So hope everyone had a good time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
See you guys.